Well, it's Saturday and the lockdown continues and appears to be never ending the way governments are responding to it all. Very depressing that that Morrison decided to extend the lockdown for another month. That really hit me hard. I didn't expect that. The guy pruning the hedge, of course, he's using a petrol-driven whippersnipper, makes an absolute racket. So I had to stop talking then. But yeah, for me it's very depressing that this lockdown has now been extended so long, and Morrison can't even get the states to agree with him on getting school kids back into class. There's a couple of states that are really trying to delay it, and I don't quite know why. I think it's crazy. I think that there's been a huge government overreaction to a lot of this stuff. You know, as I said before, in my opinion, they didn't react fast enough initially to international flights. Now they're overreacting and really holding the economy down. Although there does seem to be a few people out and about here today, it's actually feels quite tropical. It's quite warm. But yeah, it's at least I'm not in Melbourne. I guess that's one good thing. And being in Melbourne means you're under the yoke of the Andrews government, and they're even more bolshy than anybody else on restricting freedoms. And so, you know, I'm quite happy I'm up here. It is a little more relaxed. But although when I went to Woolworths, I think it was I can't remember what the day was. It was 3 days ago anyway. I think it was Wednesday. I just wondered, when I asked about querying the cost of some chocolate bars I bought, I moved over towards where the woman was serving on the other side of the counter, and she recoiled backwards. You know, she was so worried about any exposure from another person that might get corona. The paranoia is quite large. I mean, she is working in retail and she has to deal with it all the time, so I do have some sympathy towards her. They're doing a tough job in that respect, and of course people like that are allowed to be exposed, but there's other areas that they're cutting back on. I just think there's a lot of inconsistencies, and it's doing a hell of a lot of damage to the economy, and it's going to be burdening the youth of this country with a huge amount of extra debt. And people are talking the D word, depression, how bad the economic consequences of this is. So yeah, like I say, the cure could be much worse than the disease. The disease isn't looking that bad at the moment, to be quite frank. It's looking like just another strain of the flu, which is great. So I think it's time to reset things. I did hear some sensible suggestions online to say that in areas like this, in regional areas, country areas and what have you, where the effects of the virus have been much lower, they should basically open these areas up first to allow the economy to revive, and that makes a lot of sense. I think if they're not going to do an overall opening of the economy, then they should do some nuanced tweaking in certain areas, such as rural and provincial areas, so that at least there'll be some reviving of production and work. I mean, like, I cannot believe that just the airlines have been totally shut down in effect. I think they've got to really rethink some of this and think out, way, how can we get people flying again? Even if it, like I said, it requires everybody to wear masks in the airports and on planes. I mean, it's still better than not being able to fly. It's really restricting and hobbling the economy, these things. So it really does concern me. And you know, I don't know how ugly it's going to be by the end of the year when we get all the stats in on the economy, but I'm expecting some horrendous figures. So it's looking really dire. And like I say, the cure is looking much worse than the disease, and we've got to get things right here. And it's not just me saying that either. I've been hearing this from a lot of commentators online who I regard as much more in tune with what's going on than, say, the mainstream media, who seem to basically have agendas or owe favours to certain areas like Chinese, for instance. The CNN has been very pro-Chinese apparently, and I'm sure there's plenty of media in Australia that's been influenced by them as well. So that's why I don't bother watching it. I just think it's useless. If you want a diversity of opinion, you need to go online, and that's why it's so vital to have that alternative. Anyway, it's nice to get out and about. I've been indoors for 2 more days, and you know, it is actually affecting me psychologically. I don't like this. I want on a personal level, you know, it's creating a little bit of anxiety. It's not good to be alone for so long, and connecting online isn't the same as being with people in person. So you know, actually there was a discussion with Dr. Phil of Oprah fame, and he was saying exactly the same thing, that he's concerned about the effect on the psychology of people with this prolonged isolation. It's not normal. It's totally unnatural. And even when they had the Spanish flu epidemic, which was really bad, much worse than this, of course people didn't have to suffer this sort of social isolation. So that's probably one of the worst things you can do to people, is make them stay at home. And there's a lot more people that live by themselves in Australia these days, so and we've got an older population. I'd say we've got a lot more people that are vulnerable to psychological stress than ever before. So I don't think this is being taken into account by some of these number crunching medicos, who are probably fat cat public servants from Canberra, who aren't even being affected by this, where other people are losing their livelihoods, are worried about holding on to their houses with rent and what have you. I just don't think these people can empathise with the real world, and I'm worried that Morrison is becoming a puppet of the bureaucrats, and that is concerning. That's why I like Trump. He's a billionaire. He doesn't have to answer to anybody, and he says what he thinks, and he doesn't necessarily go with the herd. And that brings up the other thing that really pisses me off, that Australia's still paying out about $60 million to the World Health Organization, who have been totally discredited over all this, and are basically lapdogs of the Chinese. They have been providing misinformation from the word go. The head of this organisation is typical UN. The guy's a raving Marxist. This is not the sort of person you want in control of what's supposedly a non-political humanitarian organisation. It's totally discredited, as is the UN, in my opinion. We could do without both of them, to be quite frank, but as I say, unfortunately, Australia's going with most of the herd and just continuing to pay money into this organisation, no questions asked. I think it's pathetic. And of course, I heard that with Josh Frydenberg, who I don't particularly rate that highly, to be quite frank. I think I'd love to see our politicians show a bit more independence like Trump does. That'd be brilliant, but can't see it happening. And the other thing that's happened this week, of course, is Turnbull's memoirs are about to come. They're coming out on Monday, apparently, but there's been a lot of leaks about it, and boy, that man is bitter and twisted. But what I think some of the best things I've heard was what Peter Credlin said about Malcolm Turnbull is utterly damning, and I think Peter Credlin's a pretty credible person. She seems to be, sure, she was Abbott's advisor, and she's certainly not of the left in Australia, but I think she makes pretty good arguments, logical arguments, and I think I'd go with her assessment on Turnbull. It's certainly it's something. I've never liked that man, and I think what she says makes a lot of sense, and it's pretty damning. It's some of the most damning things I've heard someone say about another public figure before. So have a look. I'll put it up on screen. You can check it out for yourself, see what you think. But yeah, I think Credlin's a pretty classy act, and very happy we've got Sky News to give an alternative to most of the media, especially the gigantic monolith that's the ABC. boy, they've got to go turn into a subscription-only service and pay their own way. It'd be a good reality check for them to find out how many people really do want that particular type of news service. I think you'll be finding not that many. You can keep the core of it for emergency services and basic information. Sure, that can be still kept in government hands, but all the other crap that they've laid it on, they should just make that subscription-only service, in my opinion. But we'll see. Almost at the supermarket. A few people around. It's not too busy. It's a bit humid though. It definitely feels tropical. Oh, I got my shopping done. There was still an empty shelf there. I couldn't believe it. After all this time, we still have stock being sold out, so quite extraordinary. I heard on the radio that they apparently this guy in South Australia, some hoarder, had bought up some huge amount of toilet paper, and now he's trying to sell it back to the retailer. It was actually not one of the major supermarket chains. I'd never heard of them before, but they refused to buy it back off him, and even though he was prepared to take 30% less, and I think that's great. Stuff these people. They're the lowest of the low. So pretty happy that occurred. So it's good to see some of these people get their comeuppance, because really that is just really poor behaviour. Just not a good citizen, basically. Please consider subscribing to my channel if you think there's anything there of use to you, or entertainment or whatever. And either do that or give me a thumbs up, or if you're feeling really energetic, do both. That'd be great. But please don't ignore me. That's the worst thing you can do on YouTube, is be ignored.